Hello and welcome to my digital talk. Today I have a special guest from the Austrian Armed Forces, Dr. Markus Reisner. He's a colonel from the General Staff, and he has been deployed several times in conflict zones and spent significant time in the Balkans, Afghanistan, Iraq, Chad, Central Africa, and Mali. Today we want to discuss the topic of robotic wars and the indisputable power of drones. And we would like to start with a presentation that Dr. Markus Reisner prepared for us. Markus, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Velina. Hello to everyone who is listening to us. Well, as already said, I have a small presentation for you, about 15 minutes. I would like to go through all these slides to give you some really detailed information about the ongoing conflict zones and the involvement of autonomous systems. And I have also prepared some videos for you, which I would like to show you to give you a real and authentic view on what's going on in all these different areas like Karabakh or let's say the Gaza Strip just recently. Okay, I would like to start the presentation. Let me see if I can manage this. 1 second. And here we are. Velina, can you give me a short sign if you see the first slide?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. Yes. So the topic is robotic wars as a result of emerging technologies. And what we see in the last years, especially, that these emerging technologies really have some kind of a disruptive effect on the battlefields. So I would like to talk about non-state actors and state actors and a little bit about the results in the field and some small pictures which shows you a little bit also what the future might will bring. So when we talk about emerging technologies and warfare, of course, every one of you will be immediately think of drones. So the first picture when it comes to state actors is actually really the typical drone we all know. It's a Reaper drone. It's the workhorse of the United States Air Force. As you can see here, quite a prominent armament. So 2 GPU-28 bombs and 4 Hellfire missiles under the wings of this drone. And of course, this drone pretty much makes it possible for the United States to deploy wherever they want. So there are about 20 bases from where they use the Reaper, this asset. In reality, it is like this, that the Predator and Reaper, the two typical from the United States used drones, are only a small element of a quite huge part of different drones used worldwide. So according to different sources, we already have about 50 states who can deploy armed drones, even maybe unknown names to you, like Nigeria, for example, who can also deploy armed drones. This is the result not only of very prominent development in that technical field, it's also the result of, let's say, proliferation of different drone types from different manufacturers. And as you can see in this slide, we not only have the American models, now we also have, let's say, Israeli models like the Hermes 450, or very prominent, the Bayraktar Turkish drone, or Iranian drones, Chinese drones, a lot of Chinese drones, and to give you another example from another part of the world, also, for example, Pakistan. But this should only show you that there are different models already deployed in different conflict zones, known ones like Iraq or Afghanistan, but even unknown ones like the Philippines, or as we have seen just recently in Karabakh. So when we go a little bit into detail, then we can see that the West really tries to use those drones and the armament in a very precise way. It's always the question, are those killings are all legal and according to the international humanitarian law or not? But just to stress this, the president who, let's say, pushed it a lot when it came to drone warfare was President Barack Obama, Peace Nobel Prize winner. And he, for example, was also the driving force behind the development of a very special weapon, the so-called Hellfire R9X missile called Ninja. So as you can see, the special thing with that missile is that it is not armed with explosives. Now it's armed with 4 blades. So it's the impact with the blades who actually kills the victim, as you can see in the picture to the left, which shows 2 Ninja impacts in a target vehicle in Syria, which you can actually quite easily identify the result of the weapon. And when you look at the numbers, then you can see that the Predator, who is already retired from the Air Force, is used in about 250 pieces, while the Reaper, we currently have about 320, and the end stage should be over 400, but it's heavily discussed at the moment if the American budget, when it comes to armed forces, will allow more drones in that field. So this is what we mainly know when it comes to drone warfare. But the thing is that a lot of other states also developed very prominent drones and drone features. So the first case study, which I would like to point out a little bit, is Iran. Iran is pretty much a drone superpower. Iran is using different types of drones. Some of them are re-engineered models from American ones, like this example of the Shahed 171, which is a re-engineered piece of the RQ 170, which the Americans used from Afghanistan, even in Iran. And one of these re-engineered drones the Iranians used against Israel in February 2018, when they tried by using an explosive-loaded drone to infiltrate into the Israeli airspace. And the Israelis stopped that immediately, lost an F-16 during that incident, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu very clearly pointed it out at the Munich Security Conference that this is a red line Iran has crossed. And if you look a little bit into detail in all the actions Iran is doing, then you can see that Iran is using drones not only for itself, but also to arm proxies like the Houthi forces in Yemen. And as you can see here, there was a very prominent attack in September 19 against the Aramco oil field facilities in Saudi Arabia. And also here in the picture, you can see that these are re-engineered drones or cruise missiles from which Iranian actually used a lot, not only to supply them to proxy forces like the Houthis, but to also use them on their own. Another example where drones have, let's say, been heavily involved in the way we fight wars is when it comes to Ukraine. This is the next example I would like to give you. It's not only that the West is able to have a very continuing environment by using all the assets to have a perfect, what we call target cycle. No, it's not only the case that the West is doing that, but it's also the case that the East is already very capable in doing that. So the targeting cycle by using a Reaper drone lasts about 90 seconds. The Russians were able to do it in 2.5 minutes by using drones to do reconnaissance on troop deployments and then to transfer this data to artillery systems, which then are used against these troop deployments. Like it was in the case of Selenopilya, which is a very prominent name in Ukraine. Selenopilya was the case that a brigade-sized element, so several thousand Ukrainian soldiers, in the open were tracked by the Russians and then later attacked by using even thermobaric ammunition, and this had a devastating effect on the Ukrainians. And it's not only that they use these drones to do recce, no, they also using them, for example, to collect the SIGINT data, like the OLAN 10. They use more or less in a very sophisticated way to track, let's say, signals from cell phones. So they were able to actually read what the Ukrainians were telling themselves, for example, coordination, things like that. Yeah, and what the West also discovered later on in the conflict, that when it comes to the point to supervise or to observe the ongoing movements on both sides, we had a very prominent involvement with Schiebel. Then the electromagnetic field, especially deployed from the Russian side, was very, very challenging, and Schiebel had quite a lot of troubles, more or less, to cope with that field. But it's not only that the Russians are in an active role, they also, let's say, on the receiving end, and this is the next case that I would like to show you. Syria, because Syria is interesting because in Syria the Russians were on the receiving end because the game changer in the conflict was the Russian Air Force, which the Russians deployed from Khamenei. And what the Russians faced from 2018 on is several drone attacks, not only drone attacks, but swarm attacks, which then resulted in significant damage on their planes, which of course made it difficult for them to go on with the high momentum of deployment of the Russian Air Force. And the result, and this is also interesting for us, was that the Russians tried their anti-aircraft systems to upgrade them, like the Panjshir or even the Tor system, to be able to track those little radar cross surfaces of drones, for example. The next conflict zone which is of interest for us is Libya. Libya, very often it's said that it was the first drone war which we have seen here. Why? Because both parts deployed drones in a very prominent way. So on the one side, General Haftar used from UAE drone types like the Wing Long. And on the other side, on the Turkish side, so in the Tripolitanian area, we had the very famous Bayraktar drone, which we later also have seen in Karabakh. And here it is, the Bayraktar DP2, the drone which was used not only by the Turks in the Kurdish regions, but also in Syria. So they actually were able to inflict high casualties on the Syrian side when they conducted an offensive operation in Idlib province, but they also used it in Libya and later on in Karabakh. So as you can see, it's a quite small drone. It's only 12 meters of wingspan, very well manufactured air-to-ground missiles like the MAM-L and MAM-C, and quite a very good ceiling capability, let's say 8,200 meters height and up to 6,000 meters when it comes to range. So from the Bayraktar, I would like to come to the next conflict zone, which was very, very prominently discussed all over, and that was Karabakh, the situation, the clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And what we have seen here in a very prominent feature, and I'm using the word which is used by the press, it's the kamikaze drone. So you can see actually in the middle row, loitering ammunition like the HP-2 or the Orbiter from Israeli manufacturers. Then to the right, you have the typical drones used for targeting, let's say in connection with artillery systems, and to the right, mail systems, as a medium altitude, long endurance, armed or unarmed, especially in a SIGINT role. And interesting is that the Azerbaijani side also used old Soviet-style planes like the Antonov II, which they actually used in a way to like a bait. So actually the Armenian anti-aircraft systems actually were acting against those baits, and so it was possible for the Turkish side to pinpoint all these anti-aircraft systems and to attack them by using, for example, with the Bayraktar drone. But to give you an impression, I would like to show you some videos on that later, but here is another nice picture. You can see really modern warfare in a way that you see the picture of a Bayraktar targeting bot. So there is the impact of the MAM-L air-to-ground missile, and in the second, a kamikaze drone, a loitering drone, is actually flying through the picture, as you can see here, the orbiter. Well, this is when it comes to state actors. We should not forget that state actors very often supply drones to non-state actors, which they think they will use then in favor of state actors. So one of the non-state actors which we are using drones in a very prominent way was the Islamic State, as you can see here in this screenshot from a video. They even had schools where they teach children how to operate drones and how to, let's say, use them in a weaponized role. So there were two different roles where the Islamic State used drones. The one was in a reconnaissance way. That means, for example, in this picture, you can see the temporary base of the Iraqi forces in the battle for Mosul. So by using the drone, they were able to sneak into the center of this base and then explode the SVBID, the Suicide Vehicle-Borne Improvised Explosive Device, which had, of course, a devastating effect on the security forces, in that case, the Iraqi one. And the other one, the other use, a part of the reconnaissance role was, of course, the use in a weaponized role. That means small bomblets were connected to the drones and then delivered wherever they were needed. It's said that between, let's say, in the weeks in the offensive of Mosul, up to 10 to 15 drone attacks happened against the security forces on the ground on a daily basis. Well, and all these developments lead to the point that pretty much every non-state actor who is capable already is using drones. This is another example from Kurdish fighters from the PKK, which are now using drones to attack Turkish checkpoints. Or when we look what happened in Karabakh, then we can already see that the lessons learned, lessons identified, are copied by other actors. Let's say, for example, this is a Russian loitering ammunition called Lancet 3, which the Russians obviously use in Syria to fight against the rebels. We have, of course, different drone types of Iranian origin, which are used by the Houthi fighters, like the UAV-X with the extended range. Let's say, as you can see here in this backpack-style auxiliary fuel tank on the back of the drone. Then again, I would like to stress, because this is very often overlooked, we have clear indicators that the Russians are using kamikaze-style drones in Syria when it comes to battling the rebels, which are assisted from the Turkish side. Then Ukraine, this is the picture which I have shown you in the beginning. Is yesterday there was a big exercise in the Ukraine where they showed that they already are able to use Bayraktar drones. So the Ukrainians hope that with the use of drones, they maybe can have the same result like the Azerbaijani had in Karabakh, and they are developing their own indigenous kamikaze drone, the ST-35. Well, and of course, even Armenia is already starting to develop new drones in a future attempt maybe to repel the Azerbaijani attacks, which are still have not ended. So there are still clashes along the border. And the most prominent non-state actor, which used in a surprising way drones, not only drones in the air, but also underwater, was Hamas. And this is the last picture from the presentation I would like to show you from a video, which I would like to show you too, which shows a little bit how the Hamas is using drones. Okay, that's when it comes to the different types of drones and how it developed on the battlefield. Now a few pictures. A few videos. The first videos, Velina, if it's okay for you, it's a drone, a Kasef drone, which is of Iranian origin, used by the Houthi rebels. There was a very prominent incident in Yemen when one of those drones attacked the Yemeniti military parade, and therefore I would like to show you this small video, which shows exactly the moment when the drone explodes in front of the speaker's tribune. So let me stop this here. So then I will see if I can open the videos. So the first video is this drone from the Houthis, the Kasef in Yemen. So, 1 second. Present. Lina, can you see the picture? Then
the picture can be seen, yes, go ahead.
من لحظات حياته في المتارس والخنادق باليأس أو بالانهزام رغبا
Videos wird das gedruckt.
Okay. Hört man mich nicht mehr?
Nein, man sieht dich nicht mehr.
Ah, okay.
Du bist gar nicht drinnen.
Öffnen?
Ja.
So.
Ja.
Hört man mich, wenn ich da rede? Ja, ich denke schon. Ne?
Nein, man hat dich gar nicht mehr gesehen.
Okay,
Stopp bitte mit den damit wir.
Okay.
Ja.
So, I'm not sure if you all can hear me still.
Okay, so I think that
so
we are.
Have seen the drone video from the Houthis, the Kasef drone, which they use in Yemen. So the next 3 videos, very short ones, are videos which shows the use of kamikaze drones in Karabakh. So the first video is 2 Armenian soldiers. You hear the drone, they think they might be targeted, they look around with their cell phone, and then you can actually hear the drone incoming.
Mm-hmm. Are you experiencing?
Okay, Velina, can you hear me still?
Yes,
okay,
yes,
so
of course.
This is actually how it looks like when a kamikaze drone, a loitering ammunition, a loitering drone, a Harpy-2 attacks. Right? So in this case, the 2 Armenian soldiers were not hit, but you can hear the sound. So the next video.
We cannot see the video, by the way.
Yes.
It is not uploaded. Just to.
You haven't seen the video?
No.
Okay, but you have seen the Houthi video, huh?
Yes, the first one, and after the first video, there was a kind of a. It was not possible to move to the next one.
Okay, I will try once again to show the second video, the first video from Karabakh. Okay, So 1 second. So once again. So, and here we are. And here it is.
هيك يشطبه ورا هنا تخدها بوستيا هنا نايتس هنا يستلم ماما يوغن طبو هنا انتشر.
Okay, have you seen that video?
Yes,
okay,
this time
video,
it worked.
Perfect. So in that video, you saw 2 Armenian soldiers. They were in fear because they hear the sound of the drone, and then you actually recognized that the drone is actually gonna attack them, and they were lucky because they were not hit directly. So this is to give you an example how it looked like, or how it looks like when you are attacked by a kamikaze drone, by loitering ammunition. So the next video is the same attack, but during night time. And you can imagine how it was for the Armenian soldiers in the trenches to face those attacks. So the second video. Okay, so this was the second video. That was a loitering ammunition attack during night. As you can see, you hear again the very frightening sound, which is still a huge topic within the Armenian community, especially in the military, and very often overlooked because it sounds a little bit like the Stuka, these very prominent tactical bomber of the German Luftwaffe in the Second World War. And the third video is again a loitering ammunition attack, but from a distance, so you can even actually see the drone impacting. Okay, third video. that video, you actually have seen the drone, very small, but you have seen the impact actually from this kamikaze drone. So you can actually see that it's coming in a 90-degree angle pretty much, yeah, and in a very, very short time. So in the last video, number 5, is a very new one because it was published by Hamas in Gaza, and Hamas was quite clever. This was quite a surprise also for the Israelis. It was the fact that when the Hamas started to use rocket salvos against the Israelis, which then were, of course, by using the Iron Dome, more or less, let's say in a very good way, defended, so Israel defended itself in that way. But the thing is that in the beginning, while these rockets were flying in and the Iron Dome started to work on them, it looks like that the Hamasis were also using drones, very low level, coming in and trying to attack Israeli targets. And they were successful in the immediate beginning by attacking an Israeli oil refinery in a distance of 4 kilometers away from the Gaza Strip. And after this, when it more or less came to public that the Hamas were using drones, they published the following video, which shows you a little bit the capabilities of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And as you all know, Gaza Strip is a very isolated area, so it's quite a surprise that a non-state actor was able to build this very prominently used drone. So this is the next video. 1 second. So here we are. So this is a propaganda video, more or less. Yeah. Mm. Okay, so while the Israeli defense forces were trying to defend themselves against the in-flying rockets, Hamas, quite clever, used low-level attacks, used drones for low-level attacks, and this is was quite a surprise. And the Israelis reacted immediately by using fighter jets of F-16 type to actually shot down the drones. And what we also know is, and this was also a surprise, that Hamas not only used these drones, no, they also used underwater devices to attack Israeli oil rigs, let's say in front of the coastline. Okay, Velina, this is it. 20 minutes of presentation, a few videos, and now I'm open for your question.
I'm really delighted that this time it worked with the videos and with the presentation, okay. And I'm using the opportunity to underline that Dr. Markus Reisner is actually serving at the Theresian Military Academy as a head of the Research and Development Department since June last year. And all the views contained during the presentation and now during this discussion are actually my guests' views alone and do not represent the views of the Austrian Armed Forces. So we clearly saw from your presentation and also from the video that now armed drones are part of, not just part of many military conflicts, but they are actually a game changer in some of them. And I would like to start with a question that is related to the state actors. Now, given that they are also a cheap and efficient tool, and if used accordingly, as you also shown us from your slides, they can have also strategic impact. Given that background, what is actually the current discussion in Western, but also non-Western state actors about the use of armed drones? What is the state of not just debate, but also intentions of actually, using armed drones, or let's say considering them being as part of the military and defense portfolio of countries. Just to give one example, Poland is now going to be the first NATO member that is going to acquire the Turkish Bayraktar drones, and you've shown us actually in your slides already where this drone has been used. So what is the current state of debate about the use of armed drones here in Europe, in the West, but also in non-Western world, so that we get an idea about it?
So, of course, thank you very much for the question. The first thing which is heavily discussed already for years is what kind of an impact the drones will have on the way we fight wars. And not only drones, but also, the whole emerging tech field starts with cyber and finally ends with drones and so on and so on. Some say we have a revolution of military affairs like we had in the past when it came to the, let's say, development of the plane or the tank or this kind of stuff. It's always difficult for a generation living to decide or to come up with a clear answer on that. Maybe in the future, historians will tell us, yeah, this was a revolution of military affairs or not. But to summarize this discussion, everyone is a little bit nervous because there is something going on. No one really can, let's say, in a very clear way identify, especially when it comes to the future of warfare. So, well, of course, the discussion started already earlier. It started after 9/11. Why after 9/11? Because after 9/11, the United States started to use drones. And of course, at that time, it was immediately connected to the terms targeted killing. So always the question was, okay, is this legal, what they are doing? Yeah? Is this, let's say, in according with the humanitarian law or not? Yeah? Well, the thing is, whatever was behind all these different drone let's say deployments, fact is that they were very influential when it came to the way we fight wars, especially in those coin scenarios at that time, so let's say in Afghanistan and Iraq and so on and so on. And as I have pointed out, President Obama, Peace Nobel Prize winner, especially tried to make sure that when they are used in a very precise way. Yeah? So the military has a term, circular error probable. Of course, this should show that, let's say, ordnance is impacting in a very precise way. So everyone was focusing on that, yeah? Which is the first different thing when it comes to developments also today, or to the use of weapons from the other side of the hill. Because, for example, if you take the ordnance the Russian Air Force is using in Syria, only 30% of their bombs are, let's say, precision, or let's say precise bombs, or used in a very precise way, while the rest is more or less unguided. So in that years after 9/11, the drones appeared, yeah, the Reapers and the Predators, and the discussion started. Yeah, and of course it was for a long time not clear, okay, how will this impact the way we fight wars? But the more and more the conflicts, let's say, started to show up, let's say, like we have seen in Ukraine or later on in Karabakh, the more and more we recognize that in all these conflicts, drones have a very prominent role. So the thing is, still, because of the discussion in the early years after 9/11, the West struggles to find itself in a very clear approach how we should use those drones in the future. You can see this very clearly in Europe, for example. Germany still has no decision how they should more or less proceed. Yeah, should they arm drones? Yeah, should they use armed drones, let's say, for the security or for the protection of their soldiers or not? It's a debate which is going over and over for years, and there is no clear answer on that. Other nations, like the Poles, for example, who bought these Bayraktar drones from the Turks now, they try to, let's say, improve the armament of the forces as soon as possible, because they have a clear challenge when they look to the east, because they think maybe Russia will be in a very prominent way face their forces, and they have to be prepared on that. And the Bayraktar drone is a perfect info ops campaign of Turkey in a way that everyone is wanting them, of those drones, because they think, well, they can overcome Russian air defense system. There's the huge discussion with the Panjshir system. Is the Bayraktar drone able to actually overcome the Panche system, which is more or less always a discussion which is not completely correctly conducted, because we always have to think about the electromagnetic spectrum, electronic warfare, which is also very, very important, because all those drones can only act if there is, let's say, the electromagnetic environment prepared for their use, which is also very important. So, like Ukraine and Poland, they are buying these drones because they think that they can now, in a way, have a possible success in the case of, let's say, a violent conflict. We not only see this in Poland or in Ukraine, because there's another state in Europe who bought just recently drones, armed drones, and that was Serbia. Serbia bought drones from China, so they just did it. So they bought drones in an armed way, which also is interesting when you look at the Balkans, because now the Serbians have those armed drones, more or less. While, again, on the other side, Germany is still struggling. Well, Austria not even have started with the discussion. And other nations either use drones from the United States, like the French, for example, because they use Reapers in the Sahel, or the Italians, or even the British, for example. So while the West is still struggling how to go on, the East, or let's say possible opponents of the West, have in the last years done a lot to develop drones. So the Russian drone program nearly, in a way, exploded. China, for example, Chinese drones are flooding the market because you can buy more or less cheap Chinese drones in an armed version. While the United States say, this is, by the way, also the background when it comes to the Turkish drones, because President Erdogan wanted to have American drones, and Americans said, no, we will not sell drones to you. So Erdogan said, well, okay, then let's develop our own drones. So this was then more or less the result of the Bayraktar. And by the way, the newest Turkish drone is named Akinci, which is also quite interesting name when you look a little bit into history. So the East has figured out that when it comes to a possible asymmetric situation, you can use drones and you can counter the West in a way. So we have now a more symmetric situation in a way. And of course, it's not only drones, but there are also other developments like hypersonic weapons, undersea torpedoes armed in a nuclear way, and so on and so on. And while the West is still struggling also with the discussion, can we use drones in a way that they fit into the humanitarian law? The East is just doing it, or let's say our possible opponents, because they see a clear advantage for their warfighting capabilities in the future. And as you all know, some scholars already say we have already a new armaments race, which maybe has started with drones and finally will end with artificial intelligence, which is then more or less steering or controlling those drones. And of course, this is a question which has a lot of implications for us.
And are there at least any discussions at the European Union level or the NATO level as to whether armed drones should be actually acquired and be included in the defense programs in the future? If we look at the cases you presented during the first part of the talk. So we have the situation in the south, we have the situation in to the east of the European Union, and where actually armed drones changed to some extent the direction of a military conflict. Now you've also pointed to Ukraine acquiring drones with the hope of changing probably the military equilibrium in eastern Ukraine. Do you think that we are not just when it comes to the European member states far behind in our debates, but is at least something happening at the level of the institutions?
Yeah. So first thing is we have also again here go a little bit more into detail. So it's not only about drones. Yeah, it's also how can we defend against drones, for example, when it comes to these kamikaze drones, how can we actually defend our forces or states against the use of possible kamikaze drones, for example. So this is the one thing. It's not only the drone itself, but also how can I defend against one who is using that one. So, and again, the problem is the discussion is very poisoned by all the things we have seen after 9/11. So everyone let's say there's the word drone. Everyone has maybe a Reaper in his head, and okay, targeted killings, and the wedding in Afghanistan, a lot of civilians died, and so on and so on. The East more or less doesn't care about this, because they see as a clear advantage that those autonomous systems will give them in a possible future warfighting competition against prominent states like the United States. In Europe, it's more or less the fact that individually states are, let's say, trying either to procure drones or, let's say, to develop drones in different ways. Mainly they focus on reconnaissance or even protection, even when it comes not only to flying drones, but also to land systems and so on and so on. Some already have started to procure drones for the capability engage. So these are the armed drones, like Great Britain have American ones, the French have drones in an armed version, the Poles now, the Serbians, and so on and so on. Other nations cannot even afford because it's very expensive or not, or the discussion not even has started, like in Germany, for example, because Germany is using drones, but in a leasing version from Israel. They're using her own drones, which they started to use in Afghanistan. And the question is, can we arm those drones or not? And as I said, the discussion is still ongoing. On the other side, you see in Russia prominent programs like the Ochotnik is one example, or the Orion, which is a mail drone, or even in China, where you can see that they have identified that there is a clear advantage, and there is not much discussion about moral standards or ethics. They're just doing it because they think now we have a symmetric situation, and even later on we have an asymmetric situation. So we even can overcome the opponent, in that case, the United States. And that brings us to the point that we have to accept that there is already an arms race ongoing. And I just would like to point at one thing which happened last year from DARPA, that is the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency in the United States. And they came up with the idea, what's about, let's say, a future fighter plane in a very, let's say, nearly full autonomous role, and they started to do the so-called alpha dogfight trails. And what we have seen there is that a robot in 7 turns always won a dogfight against the human being. And as you can very clearly, as a result, see, the first who has this fully autonomous and in a way very high, in a very high autonomous grade flying plane or drone will be more or less in an advantage in a very good, in a very prominent and position when it comes to face the opponent. And so the arms race more or less has already started in that way.
Mm-hmm. You pointed out there is no international, basically legal or legalization, let's say it that way, of the use of armed drones, which of course make it much easier also for non-state actors to get to them. So simple systems can be meanwhile ordered on the internet. Where do you see is the trend headed to when it comes to the use of armed drones by non-state actors? And you also gave some examples, but what would be, in your view, the really, so to say, worst case scenario when it comes to the use of armed drones by non-state actors?
Of course. So first, just a few words about the law regime, more or less. This is also discussed very heavily within the scholars. Do the law regimes we have as international humanitarian law, use in bello, use ad bellum, are they sufficient enough for these new weapon systems? So there are two, let's say, ways. The one, let's say, 2 directions. One direction is saying yes, because this is just another weapon, so everything is fine with it. And the other one said, no, we have to come up with a new law regime, especially when it comes maybe to future lethal autonomous weapon systems. So this is the one thing. Fact is that we have no law regime concerning armed drones. And as you always know from the past, something has to happen, like it was with gas after the First World War, or let's say the atomic bomb after the Second World War. something really frightening has to happen, and then out of the sudden everyone says, "Ooh, Jesus Christ, what have we done? We have to come up with more stricter rules." And drones are very often always used to explain or to show a little bit or point in the future, let's say, as the first step to a maybe in the future fully autonomous weapon system. Okay, but for the moment we have no and we will not have a law regime because everyone sees, especially the military, a clear advantage. Not always thinking in an aggressive way, but also in a way to defend and to protect their own troops. So no one is interested in a law regime. And by the way, we do not have a law regime when it comes to air wars still since the end of the First World War, because everyone knows that, let's say, the plane has a huge advantage when it comes to warfighting. So, of course, we have the use of drones by state actors, and maybe in the future we will have not these coin scenarios we had in Afghanistan and Iraq in the last years, but we have maybe scenarios where China is facing United States, for example, okay? So some kind of full-scale war. But more prominently used are drones, especially smaller ones, by non-state actors. And again, I would like to point out that very often non-state actors, because of proliferation from state actors, are getting hands on drones, like I have shown with the Houthi example. And then the question is, if a non-state actor, a terrorist organization is using drones, can this have an impact on us? Of course, very fast. It can also have an impact on us in European societies, because just imagine a terrorist organization is using a small drone loaded with explosive during a soccer game in a stadium, for example, or some other weird examples when it comes, for example, to biological warfare or chemical warfare. So there are, let's say, scenarios which are really frightening in a way, and therefore we have to be prepared. That means we need counter unmanned aerial systems. We need clear strategies on that. We need also a clear idea, let's say, what can they do and how can we actually react on that. So these are answers we have to come up with. But the problem is still politicians and even the society has not completely understood what's going on here. Yes? Everyone is talking about drones and cyber war. So what does it mean for me personally, or for me as a politician, for example? And this is why it is so important to start talking about this, to bring the discussion into the societies and to come up with clear answers. Let's say, for example, yes, we will procure armed drones, but only for the protection of our soldiers and not in an aggressive way. Or yes, we will come up to buy counter-US systems, but especially to defend against the terrorist attack and so on and so on. So these are the answers we have to come up with. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you also said drones can be used as weapon carriers. You pointed to the possibility of them being loaded with explosives, but they also could be used for the deployment of chemical or biological weapons. If we think in terms of worst case scenario, yes. This is quite a realistic, actually, worst case scenario. And I see also in that context no real preparation on the side of governments how to equip their armed forces adequately. So do you think that really something seriously bad should happen in order for decision makers to start this debate? Or, I mean, it's obvious that the technological breakthroughs are already taking place, and it's also obvious that neither the laws nor the governments can keep up with these technological breakthroughs.
Well, sure. I mean, the answer we will have we will find the answer more or less when we look a little bit more how in the past things have developed. Of course. So again, certain systems were developed. No one was clear, okay, what will that mean for us? Let's say the plane. So the first planes were going around, looking very funny. No one was actually really interested because it was new. Other ones said, well, this will be the future. Okay, we know what impact planes and bombing finally had in warfare. And also when it came, especially in the Second World War, to the point of civilian bombing. The next one is the atomic bomb. Everyone was developing the atomic bomb, Robert Oppenheimer, because it was against the Nazis and Japan. And then was Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Oppenheimer said, "Ooh, I'm the destroyer of the worlds." But it was after this happened. So, and again, now we have developments which might at the end lead to a situation where artificial intelligence will be able to control the decision between life and death. And this is a very, very delicate decision. So I think we have to accept that drones in a certain way will, or let's say autonomous systems, will influential when it comes to the way we fight wars. And we are at the starting point. So we haven't talked about swarms, for example. Swarm technology is very much connected to the term of saturation. So if there are many, many drones attacking at the same time, whatever defense system you will have, Iron Dome will be more or less overwhelmed because there are so many. So there are clear advantages when it comes to that thing. But the point is, where will it end finally? So and now I would say that in the West, United States, Europe, we have already started a very useful discussion when it comes to moral and ethical principles. So we are doing this. We're discussing it. Even America, even the United States, all the papers are saying, well, we're building drones, but the last decision when it comes to killing will be the human. So in the kill chain, there is always a human. Clear statement. Question is, what do the Chinese or the Russians when it comes to that point? Have we read any papers where it is very clearly stated that also they will think in a way? Or is it more that they think that they will have soon an advantage when they use maybe fully autonomous systems against the West? And this is the question, because this is always when the arms race starts. When, let's say, an asymmetric situation starts to become symmetric, and if one opponent is in a better situation as the other one tries to come up with a better solution, and so on and so on. And this will go on as long as the human being will not accept that we have to stop this, like it was in the 80s, because we said there are so many atomic bombs, we can destroy the world several times. Okay, let's sit down and talk a little bit, okay? And maybe this will also happen when it comes to autonomous systems. So maybe we'll have an incident which will have a devastating effect, high human losses. Maybe this will be not related to drones, but maybe it will be related to cyber weapons, which also can be very autonomous in the way they are deployed. So a lot of civilian casualties, and then we'll sit down and say, "Ooh, Jesus Christ! Okay, now we have." So there was the red line, and we have overstepped it. So we have to sit down and think a little bit. Okay, should we go on or not? But at the moment, I think the race is on. So everyone is trying to develop the best weapons to be smarter, better, more clever than the other one. And this we see on both sides. And the big change compared to the years to the last centuries is that everyone with a bit of knowledge is now able to control those emerging technologies and, let's say, have them result in a disruptive effect, for example.
A question regarding the most recent military episode between Israel and Hamas. So what do we in fact know about Hamas drones? We've observed that Israel's Iron Dome defense system proved to be more than a match to Hamas homemade drones. However, the cost of intercepting them was also quite disproportionate. What does it mean now for, right now there is a ceasefire, but what does it mean for the future?
Well, I mean, this is an academic discussion. What is, let's say, more valuable? The life of an Israeli citizen or a rocket or 10 or 20 who costs a lot of money? Question is, there is no question, it's always the life. And the Israeli Defense Forces worked hard in the last years to develop the best system which is actually possible act or defend themselves against incoming rockets. And this was the Iron Dome system, which is a very well-developed system. And as you all know, the Iron Dome is not acting against any rocket which is fired against Israel. No, the system, also with a little bit of artificial intelligence, knows, okay, from those 100 rockets, those 25 can be dangerous, so let's attack these 25 rockets. But again, the problem is saturation. That is the key word. If there are, let's say, 200 rockets at a certain time, the system is overwhelmed. And the problem is, if it's not a thumb weapon like the rocket, which is unguided, no, let's say if 100 drones, which you can control, or which even can control themselves in a little way, out of the sudden start to attack. And of course, when we look at those drones, which you have seen in the video, there are a lot of similarities, which reminds you on other types, especially Iranian ones. And it's not completely clear at the moment, but a lot of, let's say, scholars, let's say Norway, also doing a lot of research, like me, when it comes to drones and things like that, point in the direction of maybe Iran, who had some kind of involvement when it came to the development of those drones. And again, it's quite easy to build these things, because when you look, for example, for the engine of the drones Hamas used, it looks like that it was a Chinese type engine, which is normally used for RC planes, for model planes, which you can procure very easily via Alibaba, whatever it is, and then you just put all these parts together, and you have a perfect drone which you then finally can use. But of course, the question is, okay, was it Hamas on itself who came up with the development, or was someone who helped them? Like we know from other regions, especially also in the Levant, like, for example, Hezbollah, which is very clearly using technical skills which they were taught by Iran, for example, or like the Houthis, for example, because it's always said the Houthis developed their drones, which is absolutely nonsense. Those drones are coming in from Iran, for example. The Kasef drone, which we have seen, is not a Houthi development, it's an Iranian drone, proliferated to the Houthis and then used against the Saudi Arabian coalition, of course. But again, you see that non-state actors, by using those assets and their technical skill, can develop weapons which then can have a disruptive effect. Like we have seen with the Houthis, officially the Houthis more or less who attacked this Saudi oil field of Aramco, which had strategic impact finally.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned several times also the role of artificial intelligence. Now we know that it's being not just discussed, but already tested in various fields and sectors. The most recent example with the new project by Elon Musk, Neuralink, where he actually wants to implant a chip in a human brain and basically create artificial, merge, not just create, but merge artificial with human intelligence in an absolutely unprecedented way. Do you think that robots will change the public's relationship and also the relationship of governments towards war and military conflict? And and in addition, I would say also, does the ability actually to watch or make YouTube video clips of combat or military conflicts, and we've watched some of these clips also during the presentation, thousands and thousands miles away, turn war also in a sort of, or in a form of entertainment, where our perceptions about war change?
Yeah. Well, of course, I mean, this already started in the 90s. I think the older ones around us still remember the videos we saw in the Second Gulf War in 1991. The cruise missiles, just seconds or split seconds before impact, for example. So since that time, we have those videos. Very prominently, we had them in Karabakh because Azerbaijan every day came up with dozens of videos, several videos showing, let's say, how they actually inflicted mass casualties on Armenian hardware, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, even soldiers then finally, because there weren't any targets left more or less. So they were attacking groups of soldiers already. So this is something which, of course, more or less is something we have to accept, because this is fact. Wherever a conflict goes off, immediately, let's say after the first impacts, we have seen that in Gaza, you can pretty much in time watch what's going on there. So second is the drones itself, and this is one of the arguments which is always also brought to attention to everyone, is that maybe the drone gives you the possibility to act in a remote way and you're not directly involved with the thing which is happening there. So there are pros and cons. So some drone pilots even say, well, I'm watching the target for several hours, even days, so I'm very close to the target, which I then finally will attack by using a hellfire. Others say, well, of course, if I'm not using my soldiers, it's only drones, then I don't care. Let's say 100, doesn't matter. So there are a lot of arguments in the way, but of course, I think one thing is we should not forget that drone is a very good possibility, especially for this new kind of wars we fight at the moment, like these hybrid wars, which already start, of course, let's say in the information environment, but especially when it comes to the point who is responsible for something. So who was the one who sent a drone to another country? And as we all know, a drone is unmanned. So if a Chinese drone pops up somewhere in the South Pacific, there is no little Chinese in there which you can actually show the world and say, look, there was a Chinese crew member and he's the responsible. If the Americans are flying drones over Iranian airspace and the Iranians are bringing them down, there is no American pilot you can show the world, and the Iranians, even if they say, well, this is an American drone, the Americans will say, well, I don't know where this drone comes from. Or as we have seen in Ukraine, the Ukrainians tried to show us, see there and there, look, those are Russian drones which are flying in our country, and the world was more or less ignoring it. Because, well, of course, we don't know. It's, fake news, whatever it is. So this is the big advantage. No pilot means no, in a way, accountability. And this is something which can be quite dangerous in the future. Well, artificial intelligence, this is the big discussion. I'm always comparing it with the example, who will be the winner in the future, Tom Cruise or Terminator, so Arnold Schwarzenegger, so the pilot, now the second time in the new movie, who is so brilliant that he can even fight the drone, or will it be the robot like Arnold Schwarzenegger, or will it be something behind Arnold Schwarzenegger, means Terminator, Skynet, so something which is in the cyber world, in the new domain? Well, this is the thing we don't know. But again, I would like to stress all these developments we will not be able to control until the end. And especially in the cyberspace, everything is acting with, let's say, light speed. And this is quite problematic because it's quite faster than a human can think. If someone attacks you in the cyber domain, you cannot decide, should we react or not? It's, let's say, in the split second, you have to do it. And this is done in a very autonomous way. So the defending systems more or less are doing it already without any human involvement, because if they are not doing it, they will be overwhelmed. And, all the things point in a direction where the human being is losing more and more control about all these technical gadgets he has invented. The next thing is, all the new developments when it comes to computers. We don't know. So there, in the future, we will not only have 0 and 1. No, there is an in-between. And if we feed some stuff into the computer, then the computer will give us an answer. And this answer we have to follow, because it's a computer answer. It's a simulation, so there is no mistake on it. And as we know from the past, there are a lot of examples, very prominent examples, where we actually can quite easily see that if we trust the machine, we might fail very badly. So at the end, it should be always the human being who come up with the decision. And this is the point where the discussions should start, and why it is so important. Like today, we discussed this thing.
Well, a final question on my side, because we already extended the 60 minutes format. You published a book on robotic wars and the use of military unmanned systems in 2018 in terms of modern conflict scenarios. And this book was published in 2018. if you were to basically re-edit your book, adding a new chapter to it as seen from the perspective of post-COVID-19 pandemic scenarios, and also what we've witnessed in the most recent times, what would you add to your book? What now that you are more wise, 4 or 5 years later, what would be actually the one chapter that you would like to add to your book on Robotic Wars?
Well, the thing is, I just would like to pinpoint it by using one example. So in the book, I described several systems which are at that time were very, let's say, on a very high level of autonomy. And one of the systems I described is the Harpy-2, the Harop. So these kamikaze drones, which then was used very prominently in Karabakh. So what I would do is I would add a chapter by reflecting on the things I have written at that time in 2018 and 2017, and tell the reader, okay, see, what I have written 2018 materialized only a few years later in a way that we have seen them. So the question is, from all the other things which are still in the book, what will be the next things we will see in the upcoming years? But this is then maybe the stuff for a sort of 4th edition, I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
So thank you very much for taking the time and participating in this highly interesting digital talk on the use of armed drones and robotic wars. I do recommend to our German-speaking audience to buy the book. It's available on Amazon. And I really like also the fact that you basically point to the question whether it's up to the humans, and you've also pointed out during the conversation, in the end, it's up to the humans to decide how to shape the future in terms of decisions on or against the use of these technologies. And the same goes for artificial intelligence. In the end, it should be up to us humans to decide how to use this technology, or whether we should not use it in specific areas. And I'm really, really grateful also for the opportunity to present us realistic, not just realistic scenes based on the use of armed drones, but also realistic scenarios for the future. Thank you.
Thank you
for being with me.
Thank you for listening. All the best.